Okay. All right, so back to introduction. I teach an interdisciplinary grade 9 program in Riverview, New Brunswick. So in this program, I co-teach 50 students, science, social studies, French, technology, gym, and personal development, which is a careers and health type course. So I share these 50 students with another teacher, and our program runs year long for at least 2 periods or 2 hours a day. I also teach French and social studies. I'm wondering if you could just quickly let me know if you heard the part uh, about a territorial acknowledgement. Okay, perfect. So what I would like to do is I would like to acknowledge that I am on the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And the way that I like to do these territorial acknowledgements is a way that was taught to me by a colleague of mine who is an Indigenous cultural support worker in our district. And she really encourages people rather than using a either kind of set acknowledgement or something scripted to really try to reflect the day of or the minute of on their relationship with the land and their relationship with colonization. And I really like this because to me it feels a lot more authentic and it feels a lot more meaningful. So I would like to invite you to kind of do this at the same time as me if you would like. So I'm here on traditional Mi'kmaq land, and I've been traveling around the Maritimes a little bit recently. But I'm a teacher. This is my summer vacation, and I was in the Île de la Madeleine, the Magdalen Islands recently, and I was thinking a lot about how settlement and how human caused climate change has really affected these traditional territories. From things from food source in the Magdalen Islands, they are experiencing warmer weather, which is affecting warmer oceans and is moving their lobster populations to even the coastline of New Brunswick, which is something I love so much, but is in and I guess not but and is also a really manufactured landscape because of diking and other land reclamation. So the way that it currently looks is not the way it has always looked. And the way that we are used to seeing it is very much not the way that traditionally it would have looked. So I would like you to kind of maybe consider your territory, consider the land that is really close to you, and then think about what that really means. So, but where's the geography? So I teach a million things. We teach them all at once, but where is the geography in this? So New Brunswick's Anglophone system doesn't have any mandatory geography. There is an optional course in high school, but there is nothing mandatory. But there are, however, place-centric objectives in social studies. So our school uses historical thinking concepts as well as the curriculum objectives. And I will say I'm also very fortunate to work in a school that that gives me a lot of autonomy in terms of evaluation and assessment. So some examples from this project that are for Social Studies 9 are that students will analyze the effect of human settlement on place over time. I think this is an objective that is really common. I think a lot of programs have something kind of like this. And it's really great because it really is centered on place, right? So it is really centered on how human settlement has changed place over a certain period of time. And it's nice and broad, right? Like over time, as in 50 years, over time, as in the Anthropocene. There is a lot of flexibility there. Students can establish historical significance, and students can identify continuity and change. So both of these are historical thinking concepts that also do lend themselves really well to place. They are really, really useful for thinking about place. So what is historical? My I guess academic background, I have a master's in history, and that's what I love to teach. But I really like doing it in kind of a place-based and local sense. So what is historical? How do we know what is historical? What makes something historical? And then thinking about continuity and change. So how do we know what stays the same, and how do we know what is different? I'm just going to check and make sure that I don't have any questions and that everything is okay. So why are we using geography, right? We're teaching a bunch of things. This is already a really complex course. So why are we using geography? So we use this as a place-based lens, and I use place-based in kind of in a really literal sense, right? Like it is based in a specific place. For me, this is the Petitcodiac River. It is the river in which the tidal bore happens. It is also the river that separates Moncton and Riverview. So it is something that my students see literally every day. Their parents probably cross it to go to work. They cross it to play sports or to maybe get groceries or mall. So it is something that is a just omnipresent local landmark. And we use it to kind of tie these things together, right? So to tie ideas of science, ideas of history, technology, development, and to tie them to something. So rather than students coming to the idea that we are combining these things, we kind of have like the pot to combine them in, which for us is place and is geographical thinking. So this is really nice in the beginning of the year because students, when they come into this program and they are doing interdisciplinary projects for the first time, this is the first time in their life for many of them that they've been asked to think about like what science has to do with history, right? And like what science has to do with French. And it gives them context and it gives them a structure to do this with. And I really like looking at geography and place-based learning as a lens, right? So it is something that you can really apply to anything that you're doing, I think, pretty well. And it just adds meaning. It adds more significance and it adds, I think, more value. So geographical biography is a term that I have kind of made up. And the idea is that for this project, we are telling the biography, so the really personal story of this place. And the geographical feature that we are talking about is the tidal bore. The tidal bore is a natural feature that exists in Moncton. Has anyone here seen a tidal bore happen? Yes, Terry, I can do that. Has anyone seen a tidal bore? Yes, the one in Moncton or a different one? Okay, great. Jessica's seen one too. Fantastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a video of it happen. So we don't have to watch the whole thing. But essentially this is it. If you see this wave coming up, so this river is the Petitcodiac River, and it is a tidal river. So the river changes directions with the tides, right? In a concept I think we're all familiar with. But what is really interesting is when the tide comes in, it comes in all at once. So it comes in with this big wave and then it fills up really, really quickly. And then it trickles back out. So in one direction, it is a slow progressive trickle. And in the other direction, it is really, really aggressive. You can hear it really clearly. There's no chance that you will not see it. It is really fascinating. Yes, you can. You can surf the tidal bore, especially in the summer. There are people out surfing it all of the time. And I'll let you play a little more. So I think you get an idea. And this is what it looks like. It does this twice a day. It's about every 12 hours and 6 minutes. And it is, as you can see, just this really, really big wave. It is a very rare natural phenomenon. It only occurs a couple places in the world. And the really neat thing, the thing that I really love about this is that it is something that our students are just not that familiar with. So the bore itself is something that the students have, like maybe they've heard of, but lots of them have never actually seen it. So the first thing we do when we do this project is that we walk them down and we go look at it. And we practice scientific observation, and we listen, we take pictures, and they get to experience it for the first time. So how do we go about telling the story of this place, this natural phenomenon, in a really multifaceted and interesting way? So when we think of the tidal bore, right, like you might think of kind of ecological explanations, right? Like why do the tides allow this to happen? Why does this happen in this river, but it doesn't happen in other rivers? Why are the tides in the Bay of Fundy so big? Why is the river brown? Right? We have all of these wonderful inquiry questions, but sometimes they can kind of get stuck in one idea, right? So if we're in tidal, kind of tidal science ideas, which are really fascinating, there's a lot there, obviously, but there's also some really great kind of other themes, right? So I have some photos here. This one is a photo of Moncton. This is the Petitcodiac River, and you can see these wharves. So Moncton, which is kind of tough to think about because it's so inland, used to be a port. So you could sail tall ships into Moncton. And these wharves were built there to accommodate that. And you can see the carriage, you can see the storehouses behind it. And what is obviously really interesting is you can't get a tall ship in the way this picture looks now. There's not enough water. But these wharves, the water would come up to the top of them. And you actually could sail in a tall ship. But this is really, really dependent on the bore. And what I try to get students to think about is the changing relationship that we have to our environment and that we have to this one particular natural feature. So for example, I live in Moncton, but I work in Riverview. So I cross the river every day for work. But whether or not the tide is high or low or the bore is coming or not, it really doesn't affect my ability to work. It doesn't affect my ability to move from one place to another. And it, other than the fact that I really like it, it doesn't really have a big bearing on my life. However, that has not always been true. If you are these people here, if you are working in transshipment, if you are working in shipbuilding or ship repair, if you are a delivery driver, right, the bore is your coworker. The bore is really essential for the way that you make your livelihood and that you just go about your day. And I think that concept is something that this idea of a really place-centric biography does really interestingly. So how does the way that we use place change? And how does that look like in different spheres? So we did the video. I'm going to show you the student-facing document, and then I'm going to show you a couple of examples. Oh, okay. So we're going to go over here. So I'm not sure why this is so blurry. I've downloaded it from Teams. I do teach in French immersion, so it is in French, but I will give you the gist of it going over. So this is the Tidal Bore Biography. Mascaré is Tidal Bore in French. It's a really nice, really pretty name. So we start by describing it a little bit. We talk about the format this can take. So students can present this in absolutely any way that they want. Something we've done in the last years is to ban we ban PowerPoint and we ban posters. And the reason that we do that is we really want them to think creatively. So how do you share your knowledge without using PowerPoint? And I know that I'm currently using PowerPoint, but I think that the students can really get stuck in only knowing to share their knowledge in one way. So we try and encourage them to use other things. So the first element they have to talk about, they have to talk about the Bore at least 100 years ago. So they can go back further if they want, but the minimum is 100 years. So they have to talk about the industries, they have to talk about the ecology, and they have to talk about the people who are there. So in this 100 years ago, they are talking about, generally talking about shipbuilding. The river was a lot bigger. There were a lot more species. We're starting to see some salmon return to the river, but 100 years ago, there would have been tons. And there would have been tons of those kind of like larger predatory fish that we don't have anymore. We also, in this part, we talk about this really wonderful story that we have, and it's the Mi'kmaq creation story of the tidal bore. So we bring in the indigenous knowledge piece about how the tidal bore happens based on their worldview. And it also has some really nice tie-ins in that the story is about a giant eel who is terrorizing the little fish, and the fish ask Glooskap, the Mi'kmaq creator, for help. And he says that he will not fight the eel, but he will send a champion. I'm rapidly paraphrasing, and makes a little lobster into a giant lobster, and it fights the eel. And this is really interesting because it talks about species that we don't really see anymore in the river. And we get students to kind of look at that story and look at its ecological value as well as its cultural value. Then we get them to talk about the Bore in around the 1970s. So the reason that we picked this time is this is when a causeway was put in from Moncton to Riverview. So there's a bridge and there's also a causeway. But the causeway had these large gates that essentially partially dammed the river, making a large lake above it and not allowing the Bore to pass through. So during this time, the tidal bore was tiny. There was a lot of species die off. And Moncton was also a changing landscape, right? In 1970, we weren't building wooden ships in New Brunswick anymore. So the people's relationship with the Bore had changed a lot. And then the third part that they absolutely must do is talking about it today. So this is pictures of some people surfing the Bore. They still do it. It's really cool. And how the Bore has changed today. They have started a river rehabilitation project where the causeway, initially the gates were opened, and then the causeway was destroyed and was replaced by a bridge. So now there is much less obstruction in the movement of the river, and we're seeing some species start to come back, and we're seeing the Bore physically look different. So people who were in Moncton before the causeway went in remember the Bore being huge and loud and powerful. And then up until the last couple of years, they just found it really disappointing to go look at it because it was not the Bore that they were used to, and it was not the Bore of their youth and their childhood. So here we talk a little bit about the phases of the project. So we want them to research, to plan. They have to conference with us. They have to kind of develop their ideas. They have to conference again, and then they have to create and share. And these are the objectives that we use. I will just quickly translate. So in BBTS technology, so I can communicate using a variety of multimedia. I can use resources online to communicate, collaborate, and research a subject. There's French objectives, so I can use a variety of verbs. I can understand the essential elements of a story, so who, what, when, where, why. And I can present ideas and understanding in a detailed way. And then our science objectives, I can discuss factors that influence biodiversity in an ecosystem. And I can discuss influences from one trophic level on another trophic level in a food web. And then we talked about our social studies ones as well. And then we also put in these additional objectives. So these are things that students can do if they would like to do more. So if they're enjoying the project, if they finish early, if they find it really easy, they can go and search these other objectives and kind of move themselves further along. I'm going to show as well some examples of student work. So these are the only ones I have. They're on ArcGIS, which if you've never used ArcGIS, it's so fun. It's really great for a variety of things, including this kind of presentation software that you can use mapping. So this is students' first crack at it. They're in grade 9. So they have a map. This student has tried to annotate it a little bit. And then they have their information. They have some nice multimedia. This is a picture that I showed them that I really love. So this is a tall ship. This is in Moncton. You can see that it is at low tide. Obviously, it is it's beach. And here they're talking about the city dump and its proximity to the water. They're talking about ecosystems, and they have like a little timeline. And then this student, very similar. He put a little more effort into trying to annotate his map. And this is a really nice thing that you can do with ArcGIS is you could do these really complex mapping features, but you can also just annotate and then put it into a larger presentation, which is really nice. And this is, I find, a really nice first step for students when they're trying to kind of get their heads around GIS and mapping. Yeah, it really is. It is a really unique factor of living in an urban environment, isn't it? I really agree with you, Terry. So our goal for the students is to see the past and present through the eyes of the natural world as well as human actors. So we are trying to shift the way that they are looking at the past and shift the way that they are looking at events from thinking about it exclusively scientifically or exclusively historically or exclusively through technology and development, and really making it holistic and making it show the variety of experiences that exist. So our approach allows students to draw connections between ecology, technological development, labor history, tourism, Mi'kmaq knowledge, and rehabilitation. This is the text that I use, so how the Petitcodiac River became muddy. This is a wonderful series. They're made by Bouton d'Or Bakari, and they are trilingual, so you can see that they're in French, Mi'kmaq, and English. And there's a variety of them. I really cannot recommend them highly enough. They're just fascinating. So why are we talking about the Bore? This is a picture from the just quick parentheses. Oh, sorry. This is a picture from the 1960s of surfers heading down to go surf it. This is they were some professional surfers coming up from California who specifically came to Moncton, New Brunswick to surf the Tidal Bore. It's a unique feature of the Moncton area. There's very few rivers in the world that have a bore. It's something that when we go, as many as, depending on the year, as many as like a third to half of our students have never actually seen the bore happen. And the first year I did this, one of the teachers that we were with had never seen it either. So it's something that has so greatly affected the region and is so important to the ecology and the natural history of the place and the labor history as well of the place, but that so many students just have never seen. And we invite them to consider the kind of hidden histories of their place. So what, looking around you, is your conception of the place that you live, and then what are you missing? And we do this later on when we talk about things like Black history and heritage, when we talk about immigration, when we continue to talk about Indigenous issues. So how are we looking at a place and trying to see what else there is? So the geographical thinking portals, I'm not sure how many people have seen them. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and just show you the book. But I really cannot recommend this highly enough. Have any of you either heard of the geographical thinking portals or seen this book? Yes, several, okay. If you haven't, I really cannot recommend it highly enough. It is really, really fascinating, and is really helpful if you're trying to think about how do I teach a really critical and really involved geography. So how do you go beyond just kind of talking about place and its relationships? So I'm just going to kind of go over them quickly for those who might not have seen it. So these are the thinking portals. The first one being spatial significance. So what is where, why there, and why care? So what is in your place? Why is it there? And why does it matter? And this last one, this why care, is I think what is really, really interesting. So why does it matter that the boar is in Moncton? Here, patterns and trends. So invite students to develop their own theories to use existing models to draw new insights and fresh conclusions about the world. So this here we're kind of looking at patterns and trends over time, right? Like this is thinking of our objective of place over time. Recognizing the reciprocal nature of these interactions is essential to understanding their complexities. Viewed from a systems perspective, geography becomes dynamic. This is really, really key to us, is thinking about natural systems, human systems, and how do they work together to create the whole system of a place. Geographical perspective, so developing a holistic understanding of the qualities of a place to develop a geographical perspective. This requires understanding the human, economic, social, historical, cultural, and physical features, landforms, climate, soil, wildlife, vegetation that characterize a place. So this obviously is something that we do. We talk about history, about economic development, about a variety of cultures. We talk about species, we talk about water health, about plant and animal species. And evidence and interpretation, what information can be used as evidence to support ideas about geography, and how does geographical evidence justify the interpretations offered? This one is something that we kind of try to do towards the end because it is tricky for them to think about. And we do a lot of this with our work in species. So looking at species counts, looking at information from people like the Petitcodiac Watershed Alliance, who are really wonderful NGO who work in the health of the watershed. And ethical judgment. So while other portal concepts invite students to inquire into the way things are or how they might be, the role of ethical judgment is to engage students in considering what should happen, whether what has happened is desirable, and how a positive and responsible future might be achieved. So this is really key for us because they have to put the pieces together, and then we expect them to talk about it. So why does it matter that the causeway was taken apart? What kind of factors motivated this to happen? What do you think we need to do next? Do you think that economic development can be managed with a healthy watershed? Right, so we get them to kind of think about these big questions once they have the information to make a judgment. So we try to inform them so they have the vocabulary, they have the ideas. Afterwards, they can then make critical and informed judgment rather than just their first opinion. So what I'd like to end with, and I'm going to, I'll ask for some participation if you're comfortable, is I want to kind of give you the tools to replicate this. So the really wonderful thing about this project is that you can absolutely do it anywhere, and you can do it in most classes too. I'm really, really lucky to work in an interdisciplinary program, but you could do this in social studies, you could do this in science, you could do this in a wide variety of programs. So thinking about this is a picture of someone from around the 1920s ish who is looking out at the Bore. So this has been a tourism attraction for such a long time. So think, what about your area is special and interesting? So think about natural historical actors with questions like how does this work? How does this happen? Or why is there? So what about your area is unique? What about your area is really special? And we're going to kind of go from there. I have a couple that I was kind of thinking about as I've been traveling the last week or two on vacation. Is the ice flows, I think, are really fascinating. So around the St. Lawrence and the Magdalen Islands, their changing relationship with sea ice, I think, is really, really interesting. And then I think another one that would really cool is the grasslands in Saskatchewan. I think would also make a really great project. Working in Southern Ontario, surrounded by the Great Lakes, provides numerous local examples of how we have interacted with the lakes in so many different ways. Yeah, Terry, what do you teach? Lucky, lucky. That's awesome. I am very jealous of provinces that have dedicated geography. But yeah, the Great Lakes are such a wonderful example. You have these specially designed boats like the Great Lakes steamships that are designed to operate in a really unique environment. There's some really great folk music. You have a real rich kind of landscape there. Can somebody else think of something that is in their area that they think is really special about where they are? Yeah. Yeah, and the Bay of Fundy is really fascinating because um, it's so diverse too, right? Like an area like Grand Manan is which is in the bay is so different than if you were across the river in like southern Nova Scotia, or if you are up by like Parsborough, which is kind of in the northern part of the Bay of Fundy. Yeah, so there's definitely a lot you can do there. It's really neat to pick something that your students can physically see too. Um, yeah, salmon runs and changing rivers in BC, definitely. Even something like like old growth forests in BC or around Canada, really interesting. Most of our schools are by the Kitchissippi River School. Yeah, that's a really cool idea. So to have like each school work on a different piece of the river, I think is really interesting. The Acadian forest, yeah, the Acadian forest is so unique and so fascinating. Here's Garden, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Grand River, it has a deep Indigenous history that students rarely know anything about. Yes. And it's really nice to be able to bring in kind of these variety of worldviews, right? So looking at how people who are interested in economic development see a natural place, working about how like regular working people see a natural place, how Indigenous people see a place. This series by Bhutan Do Bakhadi is really good. If you're in the Maritimes or not, I think it's this is the publishing house. That series is really great. It's really helpful, and they're really beautifully done too. So what I would like to end on, I'm a little early. I was hoping to have enough to kind of break you out into rooms, which maybe I want to try that anyways. So I would like to give you I'm going to try the breakout section. Yeah, for sure. I'm going to try and break you out into rooms and then hopefully let more people try and ideally everyone participate a little bit and think thinking of your place, the one that you've picked as being really special, being really interesting. How do you tie more than one objective to it? So for us, we are talking about social studies, science, technology, and French as well, right? So how do you think about your place? And then can you think of more than one way to look at it or more than one objective. So I'm going to try the breakout and see how it goes. Okay, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes in the breakout, or maybe 3. If it works really well, I'll just do it again. Hi, folks. Welcome back. I hope that went okay for you. And now, since we're getting close to the end, I would not enough time. Oh, I'll give you more. Easy. Okay, welcome back. I hope that was a little more time. It's tough to tell. It's 3 minutes is a long time if no one says anything. So thank you, Terry, for advocating for the group. I'd like to have the last 5 minutes in case anyone has any questions. And if nobody has any questions, I would like to share a resource that I really love. So it is American, I know, boo. But they're wonderful. So this is the Leventhal Map Center at the Boston Public Library. The two librarians who are mostly in charge of it are wonderful. They are so helpful. They have been a really great resource for me learning more about GIS and learning more about how to make really like involved complex maps. And how to present them too. They have beautiful digital galleries with tons and tons of examples about ways to map really creatively. So I really recommend it very highly. I think they do really fantastic work. And it's really interesting to see what you can do when you think about spatial geographies. So with that, are there any questions anyone is dying to ask, or anything that you would like to say to end with? Oh, that's really neat. Thank you, Sherry. Merci à toi, Pierrette. À vous. That is very neat. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming. So with that, I'd like to close. Thank you very much for picking this session, and thank you very much for your participation. You've been a really wonderful participative audience. Thank you.